I apologize for yesterday's video. I had made a major mistake. I even caught it in editing, and I decided not to fix it. My girl warned me. She's like, babe, you gotta fix that. You're gonna come off as a dickhole. And I'm like, no. I say it in every single video, so my audience knows. Well, I was wrong. Basically, what I forgot to say is what's way more important than the weapon system itself is that you're familiar with it. For example, it's way more effective for Joel Farmer that's been shooting his lever action 30-30 for the past 45 years to continue to use that than to switch to an AR-15, because if you put him on an AR-15, he's going to have less experience on it. He's likely to make more mistakes. It's better for him to just stay on the 30-30 because that's the weapon system he knows. For example, this SCAR has major disadvantages compared to the AR-15. It's why it wasn't ultimately picked for like the replacement for the AR-15, even though it was supposed to be. Or the, what is it, NASJ, I can't remember the initials, it's right here. That new rifle, compared to the AR-15, it has massive disadvantages. This is why it will not replace the AR-15. I choose the SCAR because that's what I have the most trigger time on over all my other weapons, is that SCAR. So it's more beneficial for me to just stay on the SCAR. Say, like right now in the middle of this video, the siren starts going off and Chinese bombers come through town and we go into an all-out war. It's way more beneficial for me to just stay on the SCAR because that's the weapon system I know. Yes, this AR-15 has massive advantages over the SCAR, but I just don't have that much trigger time on here compared to the SCAR. And that's what I was trying to show in that video. Yes, both AR-15s and AK-47s, even the professionals using them. And when I say professionals, I'm talking about people actually in the military. That's their job. That's what they do. They use the weapon. So I consider them professionals in that particular field. Regardless, they struggle with mag reloads. However, looking at the difficulty between the two weapons, the manual of arms, the AK-47 is a harder weapon to reload, so I recommend going to the AR-15, just so when the fog of war hits you and the adrenaline's going and you can't think straight, it's just a little bit easier to help minimize those mistakes and shorten up your reload time. The reason I hammer constantly, it's not because I hate the rifle. This is the platform I started on. Once upon a time, it was not feasible to get an AR-15. This was a third of the cost of an AR-15. Sometimes even a quarter of the cost. So I could get 3 or 4 of these for one AR-15. It wasn't feasible for everybody to have an AR-15 back then because they were ridiculously more expensive. And then they had huge reliability issues because all the magazines were garbage from the AWB. If you bought a magazine, it was either, over 20 years old, or it was some sort of Chinese plastic magazine that didn't feed right. After Magpul released the P-Mag, and then all the steel mags got anti-tilt followers. You can test this. This one's a little bit easier to see. Just push on the front, and if the follower tilts forward, you're liable to have malfunctions. If it does not, you're good to go. After it got a solid magazine, now the reliability is there. The AK-47 no longer has a reliability edge over the AR-15, so therefore it makes more sense to pick the AR-15. Back to why I harp on the AK-47 is not because I hate the weapon. Yes, this could run. If I've exhausted all other options, all my other firearms are broke, yeah, I could run this, but it's not ideal. And that in itself lies the problem I have with the AK-47. If people would take this rifle on their YouTube channels, because remember, people come to YouTube for information. They're there because they're curious about a topic, whether that's what rifle they should pick, etc. If they would go, I choose the AK-47 because I just like it. It looks cooler. I would be totally fine with it. It's when they try to argue that this has advantages over the AR-15 I get upset because it doesn't. The AR-15 has advantage over the AK in just about every single category. Ballistics, this shoots flatter. You are increasing your likelihood of hitting the target when your bullet moves less. This holds more ammunition at less weight. It's a lighter package. The manual of arms is better. The ergos is better. The availability is better. Parts commonality is better. There is no particular category that the AR-15 cannot beat the AK-47 except for maybe looks, style. That's about it. And even then, it's arguable because the AR-15 is also a sexy looking rifle. For example, when it comes to manual of arms and having a disadvantage, my FNX 45 Tactical, this is a DASA with a safety. Not an issue. I never use the safety. I'm always off safety, hammer down. Never a problem. Well, I went and ran 3-gun. And in 3-gun, if you have a safety, you have to use it. That's not negotiable. So I'd start the stage. Make sure it's unloaded again. Start the stage, pull it out. And it would take me a second, like, what the hell is going on? Look at it. Oh, duh, safety's on. And then, boom, start running my stage. Same thing happened with my Mossberg. At that particular time, I had a pistol grip stock. It was a pistol grip adjustable stock because it looked sick as hell on this shotgun. Well, in 3-gun, you have to run the safety. With that particular stock, because your hand's down here, I go to start the stage. What the shit? Oh, safety's on. So then you'd have to break your hand position, come up, operate your safety, go back down, and then you could start running the stage. And that's one of the main reasons I switched over to this stock, because I'm like, what if the safety has to be on? Normally it wouldn't matter because I just never use the safety. I didn't run one in the pipe. So when I'd want to shoot, I'd charge it, and then I'd start shooting. I never ran the safety, so it didn't really matter. The pistol grip stock worked just fine. After I was forced to run the safety, I came to the conclusion if the safety's ever on, that stock is a massive liability because I'd go to shoot, and I'd have to break my hand position to operate the safety and then come back down on the pistol grip. With this particular stock, so I go to shoot. What the hell's going on? Oh, safety. And then I can fire. So it's not so much that I hate the AK-47. I'm totally fine with it. What I don't like is when channels will make the claim that that has some sort of advantage that makes it worth buying over the AR-15 because it doesn't. So then all these viewers will come. They don't own a rifle yet. They don't know anything about firearms. They will go and spend double what it would cost to get an AR-15 to buy an AK-47 that may or may not be good because they don't just roll off the assembly line good. Do I need to bring up IO or the RAS-47? Let's not even go there. You have to know what you're doing when you purchase an AK-47. So not only are they going and spending basically double what it would have costed them to get an AR-15 to buy an AK-47, they're rolling the dice. Even like the Chinese AK-47s and the Vepers and the Tantals, those all had a huge washout rate. And let's not forget what kind of AK-47 they're going to buy. Because you jump on the internet, it's going to tell you, don't buy an American-made AK-47, buy something that's imported. Where can we still import AK-47s from? So these are the types of AK-47s they're going to be looking at. It's either going to be assembled off of a parts kit, which may or may not be a mix master. It's going to be a used AK-47 that may or may not already have 10,000 rounds through the pipe. Or it's going to be assembled by Century Arms, like a Wasser 10 or something like that. And we all know how well Century Arms does on their gun assembling. Or it's going to be a home build that it might not even have rivets. It could be screwed together. So without understanding what a clean rivet looks like, what bolt deformation looks like, without having a bore scope to go down the barrel and make sure it's not shot out, there's a high likelihood that the reason that AK-47 is for sale in the first place is because it's used and nobody wants to buy it. Because AK-47s are highly collectible. So you're putting them on a market where people are dumping off the AK-47s they don't like. It could be garbage. The fact of the matter is, it is irresponsible to advise somebody to go buy an AK-47 when they don't know nothing about firearms. You have them buy an AR-15, this way they know they got a solid rifle. Then if they want to get into the collectability side of things later, yes, then learn a whole bunch about the AK-47, and then you can go buy one because you will have the knowledge and the tools to make a responsible decision. I would not go buy an AK-47 unless I have a couple of different things. One, a background in what kind of AK-47s to avoid in the first place. Two, a set of head spacing tools. Three, a bore scope. Four, to understand what good rivets look like and how they should look like and function all assembled. Then, yes, okay, after you have all that shit down, then start looking at the market, weed through all the garbage, and find yourself a good AK that you can collect, hang up on the wall next to your M14 and your M1 Garand. The point is there was a washout rate with the AK-47. Because it's been years since we've brought them in, we no longer remember that. There is no advantage going with the AK-47 over the AR-15. It's just the way it is. I apologize. I know you guys want to hear something different. However, if you already have an AK-47 and you are fluid with this rifle, it's your rifle, you've been shooting it for years, no, you should not switch to an AR-15. You should probably buy an AR-15 and practice with it, and ultimately when you get more trigger time on the AR-15, switch to it. But as of right now, no, don't switch to it. Now, if you don't own any rifle whatsoever, this is the rifle you need to buy for your first rifle. Get good with this. Get your trigger time on this. This has the most advantages. Because remember, there isn't just better. Every single cartridge you're giving to get. For example, 5.56 versus AK-47, 7.62x39. What you're sacrificing with this is you're picking up a little bit more kinetic energy, but you're sacrificing your medium game. So once you get past the 100 yards and the velocity really starts falling off on this, this is a superior cartridge because it's above 2,200 feet per second. If you're not familiar why that's important, take it away, Mr. Federal Guy.
Temporary wound cavity, as we expand and recover from, is different when projectiles hit at greater than 2,200 feet a second. At that point, it appears we have surpassed the elasticity capability of human tissue, and that temporary wound cavity begins tearing at its limits and margins and becomes the permanent wound cavity, which also is the conclusion why people who are center punched with rifle projectiles typically succumb much quicker than people who are hit with handgun projectiles. The byproduct of that also seems that when a rifle projectile at those velocities bypasses an organ, you will still have organic damage, whereas a handgun projectile needs to directly hit a vital organ to do organic damage.
Now, compare 308 to 5.56. This has more kinetic energy than 7.62x39 or anything smaller. This is a hard-hitting cartridge. However, you're sacrificing your short game because you're increasing recoil, you're increasing the ammunition's weight, the capacity you can fit inside of a magazine, like same size magazine. You're sacrificing your short game to get a little bit better medium game. So, inside of 300 yards, this is a superior cartridge. Push it out past 300 yards, now the 308 is going to start to have advantages. And this will ultimately become a superior cartridge because it just performs better at those ranges. Yes, short range, this is a superior cartridge. So again, yeah, the SCAR does have compared to the AR-15. However, if I had to choose right now, they were like, hey, pick a rifle, X, Y, and Z, pick your rifle right now, you need to go. This would be the one I pick, just because I have more trigger time on it. I'm more fluid with this rifle. I know it better. I know I just got so much more trigger time on this. Now, if I would have started all over again and I had more trigger time on the AR-15, that's what I would have picked. If I would have had more trigger time on the AK-47, that's what I would have picked. Regardless, the one that has the best advantages, that's the best first rifle, you want to go AR-15 because this has the most usable advantages. Inside of 300 yards, this rifle dominates. So, what I'm trying to say here is the optimal rifle is the AR-15. However, an AK-47 or whatever rifle you have more trigger time on is your better choice of a rifle. Not because it's better in ergos, manual of arms, ballistics. It's just because you have more trigger time, and that's what's most important. I suppose I should probably explain cartridge hit probability. Otherwise, I'm going to have a whole bunch of comments talking about something and arguing about something that has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Your hit probability is completely different from the cartridge hit probability. The cartridge hit probability, it doesn't matter on your training, how good you are with the rifle. It's the cartridge itself. How well does it perform? Now, I'm not going to do M193 out of a 20-inch barrel or the new 855A1 because that would make these cartridges look foolish. Those things shoot like a laser beam. Like M193 out of a 20-inch barrel, dude, the hit probability is through the roof. So, I'm even going to give the AK an advantage and give it a longer barrel. I'm going to do 5.56, 62 grain out of a 14.5-inch barrel, 7.62 by 39, 123 grain out of a 16-inch barrel. This is your point of aim, right there. At 200 yards, this is your point of impact on the 62 grain. Very close. It's about the width of this knife blade. That's not changing anything. You're not accounting for drop or anything like that. You're just aiming at your target and pulling the trigger. AK-47, it's about double the distance at 200 yards. The AK-47 is twice as likely to miss over the 62 grain out of a 14.5-inch barrel. Well, what about 300 yards? 300 yards, here's your 62 grain out of a 14.5-inch barrel. The AK-47, this board isn't big enough to show the 300-yard impact. It's somewhere down here. What about wind? Wind, you may be asking. It's a heavier cartridge. It'll buck the wind better. That's actually completely false. A lot of wind drift has to do with time of flight. How long does it take the projectile to get to the target? Now, as you get to bigger projectiles, things change a little bit. But because these are so similar in grain weight, it basically boils down to time of flight. So at 300 yards, I'll roll in the pictures right here. The purple lines are the wind. I have the target set up so it would be scaled to if you were shooting at 300 yards. AK-47 with a 10-mile-an-hour crosswind, the projectile isn't even close to the target. It's like this far off the shoulder. 62 grain, 10-mile-an-hour wind, at 300 yards, you're just clipping the shoulder. So if you were aiming center mass and he had his arms down by his side, you would catch him in the arm. If he holds his arms up, you're going to miss. AK-47, it don't matter. You've completely missed. Well, what about 400 yards drop? 41.2 inches. Okay, what about 5.56? 26 inches. What about 500 yards? 5.56, 50 inches. Alright, so AK-47 at 400 yards, 41. Oh, here we go. I'm basically in the dirt. I'd have to be aiming at the head to make contact with the target. If I aim center mass, I'm in the dirt. And that's at 400 yards. Now, remember this is AK-47. Now let's talk about 5.56 at 400 yards. If I'm aiming at the head, I'm going to hit in the gut. If I'm aiming center mass, I'm going to hit it in the groin. The 5.56, the hit probability is twice as good over the AK-47. So let's pretend you have 1,000,000 rounds through your AK-47. You know the rifle inside and out. Just by switching to a 5.56, you've doubled your likelihood of making contact with the target. I'm not even going to talk about wind at 400 and 500 yards with the AK because you're like hitting way on that side of the building. 5.56, it's a couple of feet over. So if you know just a little bit about, you're like, okay, I feel a wind on my cheek. I'm going to aim and favor this side of the target. You can make contact at 400 and 500 yards. Remember, we're not Terminators. We don't have an onboard weather system and a rangefinder in our eyeball. So with increasing your hit probability, should you screw up on your range estimation or your wind call, you're twice as likely to land the shot with a 62 grain out of a 14.5-inch barrel over an AK-47 123 grain with a 16-inch barrel. And again, we're not even going to talk about M193 out of a 20-inch barrel because it really does make these look stupid. When you see the actual ballistics and the hit probability, you're like, why in the shit would anybody go with a 62 grain projectile? The 55 rocks circles around the 62. Now, they get that M855A1 running, so it's not chewing up rifles. That is the cartridge to pick. That thing is a laser beam. It's like the M193 for how flat it shoots, but it has the BC of the 77 grain. So we're hoping they figure that shit out, but right now it's destroying rifles and it's just not that good. But that won't be that way forever. We'll figure it out. And don't forget, where exactly, show me the location, can I get hit with this 5.56 and survive, and under the exact same circumstances, can I not survive by getting hit by a 7.62 by 39? The fact of the matter is, there is no place. These are way too ballistically similar. If this doesn't have enough kinetic energy to get the job done, going to a 7.62 by 39 is not going to change that. You need to go up to a 308. There's just not enough difference to make a difference. What's more important is getting rounds on target, because this has less recoil and it shoots flatter. It increases your hit probability. You are more likely to hit with a 5.56 than you are with a 7.62 by 39. And that's not because of the ballistic curve or anything like that. Well, it is, but I'm saying, like, yeah, you can still hit with this, but your likelihood of hitting with this is greater. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you'd like to help support the channel, got my Patreon right there. I also have affiliate links in the description down below. Just by clicking on those links, even if you don't purchase what that particular link is for, just clicking on that and then doing the Amazon shopping you were already going to do anyway, a little kickback for it because you came there off my channel. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.